Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today, I'll be continuing my series of rebuilding a few Tier 1 Valorant rosters. Today, I'll be rebuilding MIBR, as you can see on your screen, who, outside of DFM, was probably the worst team in franchising last year throughout the whole course of the year. If you guys enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I spent a lot of time researching players, especially these Brazilian players, for this series, so any help will be appreciated. Also, leave a comment on what you thought of the roster, along with how the video flowed and everything. If you want certain things to be different about how I go about the video, please let me know. Any constructive criticism along those lines are welcome. But before we get into the roster, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping things. This is what I would do with this roster, not what I would predict them to do. So don't get mad at me if oh, but they're doing this X thing currently. I don't really care. I'm just going off of based on what their roster was at the end of the year. This is also going to be an entire series of teams. So if there's a player that you think should have been in Tier 1 and is not in this video, it's probably because they're in another video, or maybe I just missed them, or I think there's a certain player that's better than them. So again, don't get mad at me for that. But other than that, let's get right into the video. And as always, now onto the season recap. This team in the offseason, they brought in Heat, Muriz, and RGL Meister to go along with JZZ and FRZ, along with Bazooka as the coach, who won champions with Loud the year before. At lock-in, they went out and won, which is kind of disappointing in my opinion. But they were up against Talon, who was a decent team at that time. In the Americas regular season, they got 9th, didn't really do too much other than beating NRG in an upset and 100 Thieves and letting EG into playoffs. That was about the peak of their year. Obviously, getting first rounded at LCQ was not great. But yeah, the only relevant thing they did was upset NRG and then let EG go on the run that they went on, which was kind of annoying as a 100 Thieves fan, but also, I mean, as an NA fan, I was completely fine with EG having the run that they did. So as for who we're going to be removing from this team and who's going to be staying, this team, I'm just going to get rid of everybody, let them all go. The team was that bad last year. The only bright spot really was RGL, who in this world I have going and signing with Furia. I almost forgot the team name. So yeah, we'll just get straight on to the first player here, who is RGL. Again, as I said, incredible for this team. Why does it go back, dude? I hate when it does that. I'm gonna break something. But yeah, I'm just gonna be taking a more proven option here. That's why I'm gonna let him go. And yeah, I just think he also fits better in Furia than he does in this team that I'm gonna be building. So I don't know, not really a ton to say here other than he was good, but I have a better option. And next up, we have JCZ, who, as the duelist player for this team, had some of the worst stats in Americas. I know I'm not a big believer in stats at all, other than maybe like ADR and like first kill death ratio or something like stats like that. But other than that, I don't really put any weight into ACS rating or anything like that. But yeah, he was better when he was playing the Sky and a little bit better when he was playing the duelist, like specifically the Jet. But he just was not good for this team. I mean, if you ask him to play any other initiator, he just was probably the worst in Americas. Even when he's on Sky, he's not even top 5 in his own region, which kind of says a lot about the quality of player that you got here. And kind of sucks, but he just was not good for this team at all. Next up, you have FRZ, who, again, had some of the worst stats. I'm going to be flying through these just because these players are not good. And I think we know that they're not good. But FRZ, I thought was a little bit better than JZZ, especially on the initiator role, where he played okay on like the Sova, the Sky, sometimes the Fade. Like when he was playing that stuff, he was a lot better. But I think he was playing Killjoy for this team at the beginning of the year. I don't remember. Also, I'm gonna be honest, I've wiped a lot of the beginning of the season MIBR from my brain. I don't want to think about this team at all. But yeah, again, same thing with RGL. I just think there was a better option on the market here in this world. And yeah, I can't stick with FRZ over the guy that I'm going to be taking. Next up, we have Maurice, who was their IGL last year, and it didn't really look like they had one at most points. Like, I think the bullet point here is a little misleading. They did have one good game of calling, and that was against NRG in their upset. I thought he called a pretty good game there, but other than that, they were just horrendous. Um, and yeah, he, as an individual, never really had a like good game. He was just either mid or bad in every game as an individual, and I don't think that's really arguable. I can't even think of games that he even played well, and maybe he did, and maybe I'm forgetting. But yeah, again, just not up to the level that you'd want as a tier one team, and it's just kind of unfortunate that this team just didn't make enough upgrades in the offseason. And then lastly, here we have Heat, who was replaced mid-season for internal issues, especially I think it was arguing or like a rift between him and Bazooka, and the team took Bazooka's side, and I agree with that. So I'm going to be letting Heat go here. And he was just really disappointing. He was supposed to be like the main star for this team after how he played in Champions 2021, and then just never really lived up to that hype ever again. And I don't think he will. So there's a lot of potential here. Maybe he can go back down to tier 2, prove himself again, and come back and be one of the better duelists in Brazil. But right now, he just hasn't proved anything at all. So I can't really be keeping him here. So as for our needs here, it's everything. I mean, we dropped all 5 players, so now we're going to need to get 5 new ones. That's just how that works. So as for IGLs, you have Mazin, who I dropped from Furia, and Besni from 00 Nation, I think it was. And again, as I said in the Furia video, there's really not too much IGL depth in this region. It's really just like 5 guys and then maybe less who can become the IGL for Loud after like getting mentored by Sadak for years. So, or for a year, I guess. Or no, 2. Yeah, they've been together for 2 years. I forgot about that, but still. As for flex players, you have Shandi, Polo, and Brinks, who are all very good players in their own right. For duelists, you have Digizin, who I cut from Furia, Askia, and then I don't know why I put Heat in there. I cut him from MIBR, so I don't know. I'm not going to be picking him back up. And then as for controls, you have Pankata, who I cut from Sentinels, and Bartin, who was on 00 Nation as well, I think, but that might be wrong. As for initiators, you have Sasi, Shion, and Crane. I think that's how you pronounce Crane. If it's not, you can correct me. All very good players. Sasi, who I cut from Sentinels, Shion from 00 Nation, and Crane, I forget where he's from. And then Sentinels, again, you have Besni, who is an extremely good fragger, and Lenise, I think is how you pronounce that. But again, a lot of options here to rebuild or to completely tear down and rebuild a team here. So first up here, we have Sasi, who I think was the obvious pick out of initiator players. He's so much better than Shion and Crane, who are very good players, but they're not Sasi. He won champions with Loud in 2022, and I think he should return to Brazil after his stint with Sentinels. He's by far the best Brazilian initiator available, and I think he's by far the best Brazilian initiator, period. Maybe Cowanzine is close, but I don't know. I still would rate Sasi over Cowanzine, even though Cowanzine had a better year in terms of team success, but I still think Sasi played better when he was on the initiator. And he just gives a really good veteran presence to any team that might need it, which this team probably will. Next up, we have Sasi's former teammate on both Sentinels and Loud, Pankata, who also won champions with Loud in 2022, continued to stick with Sasi, as I just said. And honestly, the main point here is he really just should have been on a controller last year, and now can be put in a better spot to succeed. He was incredible on controller in 2022. I think he was the 3rd best in the game behind Marved and Mako at that time, and getting put back on that role should let him like start to farm again. Obviously, there's other guys competing with that role for him now, or competing with him for that, like the top of that role. But I think returning to that role, he could potentially get back to where he was before instead of being stuck in Sentinel jail. And then next up, we have the player that I cut from Furia in the last video, DG Zin. Um, Again, I talked about him in the last video kind of being a Jet 1 trick. I think it's that in Chamber. I did say that as well. He's the best option outside of Askia, who now that I'm done with the Brazilian teams, I do have him going to Loud to replace Aspas. Um, and you just kind of hope he can learn some more duelist agents. Like, even if he doesn't, he could maybe potentially learn Sage and play that a bit more for the team. Kind of plays a role more similar to what Cryo did for 100 Thieves last year, which I think he would be really good at. And then let one of these other players that I'll talk about in a little bit play the duelist for this team. If you need to, you can also do some double duelist stuff with that. Um, Maybe I'm building a little bit too much for this current meta, but I do think DGZin is just the best option available, and you really can't go wrong with picking up a player of his caliber. And then next up, we have Besney, who, in my opinion, could legitimately become the next less in Brazil. Maybe not the same, like, exact heights, but he legitimately is that good as a fragger. And he's so good that I didn't really look into who 00's IGL was because I didn't love their calling. But when I learned that he was the IGL, um, I was shocked, honestly. He was that good as a fragger that I just didn't think it was possible to be IGLing and fragging that hard on Sentinel um, at the same time. It just was crazy to me. Obviously, not the best caller in the world, but I do think he was probably the next best option in all of Brazil, at least of what I looked at. So overall, like, you don't feel great about his calling, but when you have Sasi and Bazooka as your coach, you still can have some faith that the calling for this team will be very good, along with Besney just being a great Sentinel player. And then last up here, we have the player I was talking about to play the other duelist, is Shandi, who got cut from crew at the beginning of the year, which was kind of unfortunate. I still think he probably should have been the flex player for that team after they added Kesnet. Um, but yeah, that was just a really weird move to me. I thought he was more than good enough to play in tier 1. And I think he just fills in an important gap here. Obviously, as the flex player, that's what you're supposed to do. He can play the KO, he can play the Jet, the Raze, he can play Neon. I think he can just play a lot of different initiators for this team and be a good piece. I don't think he'll be incredible or anything, but I do think he was the best option to fill this hole for this team. So, as for our final roster here, we have DGZin as our duelist slash opper, Jandi as your flex and secondary duelist depending on what you're playing, Sasi as your initiator, Besney as your sentinel and your IGL, and Pankata on controller. So let me guys know what you thought of this roster in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one for Leviathan, and that is our last Americas team. And then we're on to Pacific after that. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.